Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me out today. I was here just about 3 years ago with Alan, so it's good to see some familiar faces. But for those I haven't met, my name is Greg Schonauer. I'm with Transamerica. I'm the regional vice president. Reside just not far from here in Fort Mill, South Carolina. Been doing retirement plans now for 16 years. Hard to believe. I really focus on anything that starts with a 4 and ends with a letter. So as Alan said there, certainly here to talk to you about ERISA plans, but Alan did a great job really kind of talking about so many different options within the qualified plan space. And I think what's really interesting about the one graph he showed, the differences in how it kind of escalates. I thought, and I always tell clients, you got to walk before you can run. But, you start these conversations with your clients and business owners and, a lot of times, like he said, a closely held small company, maybe one employee S corp, maybe husband and wife taking salary. That simple already works real good, or a SEP. But then they start adding employees and then they start becoming entitled or eligible to start getting some of those contributions. So then you look to pivot and maybe kind of start going up. Maybe a 401k is next. Then you start getting to the point where you get a 401k plan and they're doing what we call safe harbor, or they're, able to pull all the levers, get as much money into it as possible, where the potential owners or key folks trying to benefit are maxing out. And then if they keep coming back to us saying, what else do you got? I want more, then you look to add what we call a defined benefit, which most people know from our folks, day is like a true pension plan. But there's been some more modernized retirement plans that have evolved that aren't the traditional pension plan, but are kind of almost like what is like a hybrid of a 401k and a defined benefit or pension plan, and they call it a cash balance. That's the fastest growing defined benefit plan. In fact, my day yesterday was extremely busy, and that's why I stepped out to finish some calls here, because 9/15 is the deadline for companies to fund their prior year cash balance or profit sharing. So 9/15 being the tax deadline. So the nice thing is you can start a 401k and kind of go throughout the year and then have that profit sharing piece to it that is discretionary, or if you're a cash balance or defined benefit, you do have to contribute, but you have the flexibility to do it all the way and till you do your corporate taxes, right? So, and of course we all know people like to wait till the deadlines, right? Yes, sir.
Without naming names, but how much did they lower their tax burden?
So I had 2 clients that funded, both of them over $200,000 in just cash balance, and then probably another $50,000 to $80,000 in profit sharing. So, and these were again, tax breaks. So you talk about whatever corporate tax break they're in, or bracket they're in, whether it's 20, maybe 28. This. One of the clients was a very successful long-term dental practice down at the beach, and they have the 3 kind of perfect variables you need for a true 401k and cash balance, are also known as DC and DB combo, as we like to call them. But if you're going to do both and kind of go full throttle, max out on the retirement plan, you really look for 3 things that exist. You look for projectable income, ongoing, right? So you can't just do this if you have a great year, right? Like, if you got into a business that took off and you had a big contract, or maybe you got into real estate a really good year, maybe 7-figure, something like that, and you're looking for tax mitigation. It doesn't really work unless you're committed or going to be able to project that out for a few years. So anyway, long-standing income, people are taking a W-2, that's probably realistically 150 to 200,000 in north. And then disparity between those you want to benefit in age and income to the other employees, right? So if you think about like a dental practice, right, like you kind of touched on it in your presentation, a lot of your CPAs, I think there's some in the room here, right? You have to take a reasonable salary, right? So if you think you're a dentist or maybe a doctor, private practice, attorney, whatever it is, a lot of those will have a higher reasonable salary. And a lot of times, they go to school for a long time, so by the time they get out, and then maybe they work for someone, they start their own practice. By the time they're ready, a lot of times they're 50 years old. They want, got 10 years for retirement. They have a big difference in age in income between them and the other folks. When you have those variables, then the kind of advanced or last, pie or line graph you had is ideal. So it's good, really good, Alan. I enjoyed your presentation. So he asked me to speak to you about what's ERISA, right? And so we all are governed by a lot of different agencies. In the retirement world, ERISA is our governing body, right? And so when you look at ERISA, what is it that they really cover? Really anything, like I said, starts with the four ends of the letter. So 401ks, some of these cash balance plans, your simples, your SEPs. Things they don't cover are your non-qualified plans. Non-qualified plans, sometimes referred to as top hat, SERP, or kind of executive benefit programs. Those are where you can kind of pick and choose. Non-qual. Sometimes, you might have a specific golden handcuff benefit to retain a key employee. You can leave ERISA and go into this other world of non-qual. You can choose certain things like who you offer it to. With ERISA, you gotta set the document and who you're going to offer. You can't pick and choose, can't discriminate. But when you go to non-qual, you can do that, right? However, kind of going back to Alan's point is, if when you leave ERISA and you go to non-qualified, those assets are not protected. So there's some benefits there, right? A lot of times we've heard maybe the term COLI, or corporate-owned life insurance for key mans, maybe buy a policy. If there's a partnership, if one person were to die in the partnership, then that money will have a benefit, which will probably lead into some sort of buy-sell. Maybe the spouse then could get, otherwise it gets kind of complicated. But long story short, non-qual is not governed by ERISA because they're just not subject. So you can kind of go to the Wild West world, but not the topic of conversation today, so we'll keep on moving. Within ERISA is really, put a lot, and it's really come out a lot lately about who's a fiduciary in a plan. So anybody that really gets involved in the day-to-day operation of a 401k plan or touches the money in a 401k plan is indeed a fiduciary. At the end of the year for a 401k, there's an IRS 5500 filing, you mentioned it. Whoever signs that has some fiduciary role in it. So ideally, anybody that's involved in a 401k plan, they need to know what they're doing, or they need to really rely on partners or companies that can truly help them perform these operations, or at least check their homework to make sure they're doing the right thing, right? In a retirement world, in an ERISA retirement world, your retirement plan is supposed to be for the participants, not for the owners. So you need to be acting as the best interest, right? And so that's where the fiduciary term really starts to govern these retirement plans. Now, when you hear sometimes in our industry different types of fiduciaries, again, beyond the person that touches the plan and touches the money, you're also hearing a lot in our industry around the investment. So think of the fiduciary coin in a 401k plan with two sides, right? So one side is the administrative, the other side is the investment. So we'll start on the investment side so you understand it. The investment side is, you have investments you're offering to your employees where they are able to contribute, but you're supposed to be actively managing, monitoring, kind of screening, making sure that they are, not duds or not too expensive. You're making sure you're giving your participants choice and the ability to make changes. Well, third parties have gotten involved, investment fiduciary firms have come along and said, hey, I'll take that role off your plate, right? 321 and 338 are the ERISA codes for investment fiduciaries that take the investments in a 401k plan. They establish what we call an investment policy statement, or IPS for short. And it's basically kind of a stated procedural, quantitative, qualitative way of screening, selecting, and monitoring the funds, right? And so just to give you a couple of examples, right? So if I wrote an IPS, I would want funds that are in the top 50% of performance to their benchmarks, to their peer groups. They want to be in the lower 50% to expenses. They want to have 100 million assets to play. So we want big mutual funds that have assets. We want managers that have longer than 1 year tenure. So there's all these different hurdles that are set forth, and an investment fiduciary will typically take the investments in a lineup They run it through this scorecarding every quarter, and then they come out with a nice, pretty report with different colors, and they'll say, hey, these funds are good, they're green, these funds are yellow, we put them on watch, these funds are red, we're gonna have to deselect them, right? So that's kind of what an investment fiduciary does. So that's one side of the coin. A lot of times, companies don't want to do this, right? And we don't want them to do it either, because that's where you can get in trouble. But the other side of the coin is really where we're going to spend more time today, and that's the administrative side of the coin, okay? When you look at like DOL audits, they're on the rise in the 401k space. You look at some of the fines that have been, handed out. Last year was $2 million in fines, right? The majority of those fines don't exist on the investment side. They really are on the administrative side. Operational errors is what, because you think about it, right? Let's say you have 30 employees, you have an eligibility, certain people are due certain things at certain times. Employee comes in, you don't offer it to them, they don't go in the 401k, doesn't end so good. They report to the DOL, as they do, to be a disgruntled employee. DOL comes in, they start looking here, and they're like, well, where was your disclosures? Where was your notice? How come this employee couldn't participate? Boom, And it could be not the intention, right? I mean, we're not trying, employers are trying to hire people that are good, that can go do good work and support their business. Most of the time it's not intentional, but DOL's got a mission and probably a monetary goal too, right? So from a administrative way that we can help these clients is we now have third-party companies that can come in and act as what we call a 316. And that's where they take a lot of this stuff off their plate and do it for them, and even go as far as signing that filing on their behalf, okay? So this is a couple examples of what they would do. I won't go through all of them because it can be kind of boring maybe to you guys, but to me I get excited about it, of course. But things in a plan, you got to have these different notices that are due at different times of the year, right? You got to approve distributions. You got to track eligibility. You got to make sure the loans are amortized correctly. You got to make sure that if you're giving profit sharing, giving out correctly. You got to make sure your plan document has been updated with the latest Secure 2.0 rules, the EGTRA, there's a bunch of different, typically plan documents are required to be restated, every time the government makes a significant change to some of the language and verbiage, but usually we see every 3 years there's a requirement, and we'll onboard plans to Transamerica. We'll find that, where's your last restatement document? What are you talking about, Well, where's your cycle 3? That was the most recent one. Well, you don't have it? Okay, well, let's help you. We'll get through it, but it happens all the time, right? And so this kind of goes really into like the cost of it. I'm not here to scare you, I'm not the DOL, I'm here to help you and your clients, but just to give you kind of a general idea, these are not small penalties. So, I like this one here. I mean, it could be up to $250 a day. So your $5,500 is due at the end of July, right? You can get an extension, but if you don't do it, the IRS will come looking for you, because once you submit a filing, a 5500 filing, if they don't get one the following year, you don't tell them you don't notify them you're terminating the plan. They're going to come looking. It may take them 18 months to knock on your door, but if you went 2 or 3 years, fines can be pretty substantial.
So it used to be max at 1,500. Is the max still 1,500 now?
No, it's gone up. It's gone up. Yeah. So I mean, there is things such as voluntary correction programs. So if you came across a client and they were like, oh shoot, we didn't mean to do it, we switched companies and we thought they were doing it, and there's, you could basically kind of hold yourself accountable by going to the DOL and doing it. They call it a VCP, voluntary correction program or filing, and you can say, hey, made a mistake, didn't mean it, and I will catch it up to speed, do the late filings, and usually that will get reduced. So it's not always that, it's just up to, right? But, if you did negligence, maybe it's a different story, right? So things along those lines, a lot of the stuff here can be eliminated, the risk of it, for the fact that now we can include companies inside the 401k package that absorb the liability of doing that. So that's where the market is going, right? So usually bigger companies have a big HR team that has benefit specialists, maybe 2 or 3 folks doing payroll, right? Teams that are, SHRM certified, HR, experts that know these rules, but small companies, they're good at what they do and they don't want to do this. So we're seeing these services that kind of make it easy, but also take that and shield that. We just continue to see it down market. In fact, what I'm going to show you here, you'll see is even popular and kind of even to the startup level now at some point. But let me go under the hood and let me show you kind of what people get involved in a 401k to make it a successful with plan outcomes and compliance. So inside of a 401k plan, you always have a record keeper. I put our logo in, shameless plug, right? You also have a TPA, which is here, the compliance administrator, third-party administrator. This is where the 316 is going to come in. And then you always have to have a retirement advisor. And that is what role that Alan plays. Alan and I have worked closely together for 5 years now. And we've done a lot of plans together. But really, without an advisor, you know, there's no rubber hitting the road. There's really no congruency of all these parties because there is a lot, right? Like, this can be complex. There's a lot of people involved. Do we always need these people? 100%. Like, they are the CPA of the 401k. They can, you know, lean on, you know, doing more, which is great. But, you know, as a financial advisor that works in the workplace setting that speaks with these participants, that's the benefit, right? That's what they really want when they buy a 401k. You know, all this other stuff is just something they got to do, right? They want their employees to have good, happy, healthy financial lives. Translates to good work-life balance, good productivity, right? We're going to hear from Michelle a lot about how, you know, workplace and wealth and health work together. But, you know, that's really where you see Alan and Michelle and some of the other ways we can bring it to the table. So a couple things I thought that were innovative that I wanted you to know. I don't know if there's any payroll experts in here, any of them. I know you probably work on some systems. You probably know a lot about payroll, but as far as payroll companies, I don't think there's anybody in the room. So we've seen a huge trend in our industry the last 3 years where these payroll companies, even some of the big ones that do 401ks, like you mentioned, ADP Paychecks, they are now leaking kind of their API or leaking their secure transfer now. So record keepers are now integrating with payroll providers because everything is driven. It's really the spoke of the wheel. So as an employee is hired, you know, the 401k system needs to know so that they can track eligibility, right? We need to know when to let them in the plan. We need to know their compensation so we can calculate the match. When they leave, we need to know that they're eligible for a distribution. If they're over a certain age, we need to know that they're maybe eligible for an in-service withdrawal. All that data comes from the payroll files. So nowadays, if you're using a national or even regional payroll company, there's probably a 90+% chance that we have an integration with them. And so now the companies will run payroll, the payroll companies grab payroll taxes, and then send out direct deposits, and then they push a secure file over to Transamerica or a record keeper alike. And then we go ahead and know what people are deferring. And then we will likely, if we have a kind of a bi-directional or two-way integration, we'll go ahead and allow the participant to make changes to their deferral through our website, app, or on the phone. And then we'll send a file back to the payroll company and say, hey, these are the people that made these changes, they took a loan, they did this change, et cetera. So now when you pull out that data or eliminate some of that, you know, manualness, it makes a big difference from a compliance perspective. You know, lastly, and I don't want to take too much time here today, but I'm going to stick around. But before I hand it to Michelle, I'm going to show you a couple more things. So a lot of you probably have heard Secure 2.0. One of the big things that came out of Secure 2.0 was a big push or emphasis on pooled plans, right? So, you know, pooled plans have been around forever, right? You know, we've had multiple employer plans since the 40s, which is a way to kind of aggregate retirement plans for buying power, reduction of administration, reduction of liability. And so these plans have been around forever. However, the newest plan on the block, or the newest pooled plan on the block, is called a PEP, right? It's a pooled employer plan. What's nice about it is you're getting what used to be like a multiple employer plan or kind of that pooled structure, but you don't have to be related, or you don't have to be a common nexus to other companies. So if you own XYZ company and you focused in, you know, manufacturing, and you got, you know, like that dental practice that I talked about, we can have them kind of come together inside this pooled environment for economies of scale. Where you find that there's a lot of benefit is price, of course, but it includes all these outsourced fiduciary roles that I described, the 316, the 338, the record keeping, it's prepackaged, it's already been vetted, it's very turnkey, companies really like that. And even companies that have more than 100 employees, or 100 participants, I should say now, because the rule changed, they're required to go out and do an audit, an independent plan audit, through some sort of, usually an accounting firm that specializes in them, and that's an additional cost. Doesn't really no value to them, it's just something they gotta do, right? So within a PEP plan, that's even something that can be rolled in as well. So there's a lot of different advantages in these pooled plans, but we've created them. We have a niche in that space. Actually, we've been doing pooled plans for now 25 years, but certainly now it's kind of front of mind.
So does the PEP avoid that audit?
In a true PEP, you basically share in the cost of it. So, yeah. So it's kind of done at a master level. And so every adopter, they call them, every company that joins is called an adopter in a PEP because it's pooled. And basically you kind of share it across the board, right? I'm gonna end there. I mean, this is just kind of like if you have any thoughts on your own plan or future maybe prospects or something. This is really what a pooled structure can do. Which I've already covered, so I don't want to take too much time on it. But at the end of the day, I mean, really, ERISA plans have been around for a long time, certainly, but the complexities have evolved, quite a bit. I think the workplace in general is more complex. Employees are coming in, leaving, they're seasonal, there's a lot going on. But in addition to ways to mitigate tax, help out the business owners, there are a lot more ways that we can help the individual participants save for retirement. Because most of these participants sit in these education meetings that we do for them, and they always ask us the same questions like what do I save? And it's different for everybody. So we're really focused in additionally on participant experience and helping them answer that question. Like, hey, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for you? Like, a lot of things come into play. When do you want to retire? Do you have outside assets? Are you married? Do they have a job? Are they working? Are they, do you have kids? Are you preparing for, taking out a deposit or maybe tapping into your retirement for their college, maybe for a wedding? Should I save more to account for that? So a lot of these financial calculations are now really made easier in a very simple, we call it on tracks, what we call ours, but they're gap tool calculators that you can plug in a little thing, you can aggregate some of your accounts, make it more automated, and then that question is not, hey, everybody in the group, you need to save 10%. It's, hey, I can tell you exactly what you need. And so I'll finish with this, and then I'll hand it over to Michelle. This will be my segue for you. So another thing we're big focused on is wealth and health. And so you think about this, if you were going to retire tomorrow, what would you rather have? Enough wealth to live on for your retirement? Or would you rather have your health? I mean, you can't answer it, right? You need both, right? I mean, that's a trick question, I guess. But you need both. And so Transamerica is starting to implement, like we have a partnership with American Red Cross, and we are starting to implement in our education more around just financial education, but also around health. So we do a lot of text messaging, healthy recipes. We have a not-for-profit research group that studies participant behaviors, and we're trying to, we believe, and our mission is, wealth and health. You need both, right? And so when I heard that Michelle was going to speak, I got excited because I believe that our mission is very similar to what you do. So with that said, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a perfect segue. Thank you. Another way to look at it is on your final day, do you think you will have more regrets around health decisions that led to the final day or financial decisions? I mean, it's just not to be negative, but I think that's a key part of it. So I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach with the health and the wealth Gonna do it this way. Okay. In our society right now, we've come a long way from the days of Little House on the Prairie, when your money was your money and you either hid it under the bed or in a coffee can, but it was your money, and it's gotten so much more complex. And what percentage of people, even business owners, actually have a financial planner? It's still relatively low, is it not?
It's growing.
Good. So it's complex. And a lot of them are letting their accountant drive all their decision making, or doing things that are sort of robbing them of opportunities to have more money for later in life. And so very grateful that there are financial planners that recognize that and help them navigate that there are companies that have tools that give them opportunities and such that they've not had. And for many people, it's easier to put their mind around the numbers. I want this much available per month later. I want this much, like you said, for weddings or college or whatever, which I think is one of the reasons that the health part can be complicated for people. It's very, very personal, just as the money is very personal, and we all come at it in different ways. We have different family habits that we've carried over the years. We've got different ideas in our head as to what healthy looks like, as to what activities we want to do. We always think we're Tigger and we're still going to bounce. Next decade I'll still bounce like I do today, and the decade after that I'll still bounce like I do today. Eventually that's harder to do. So I am on a quest, as you know, to help people also think about, how do you stay healthy? Not just physically healthy, but how do you stay mentally healthy? How many of you took a big emotional hit this week just with the stuff going on around us? How do you stay emotionally healthy? How do you stay socially healthy? How do you have relationships that go with you into all the next phases of life? How do you stay spiritually healthy? Whatever that looks like for you, it's an actual critical part of that overall health. So exercise, diet, relationships are such an important part of it. But we put a lot of emphasis on climbing the ladder, reaching our professional goals, getting where we want to go financially, having the yacht at the end of it, or whatever our big reward is in this life, that, man, I worked hard and I met my goals. So lots of personal differences there. And what I have found, and if you don't know me, I'm coming at this with 30 years in healthcare, and I reached a point where my great mentors, and some of these were healthcare administrators and deans and university presidents, people who had been tremendous influences in my life and household names in what they did. Give them a year after their retirement, they were fading away, they were dying, they were no longer knowing where they could be influential. And I'm like, how could what I consider some of the best people who had it all together be struggling with this? So that's when I left academia and healthcare, for the most part, to get in front of this, because I found people were just assuming, oh, my wife can't wait for me to get home. She's been waiting 40 years. And the last employer I had, he retired, and his wife said, you're not going to be in this house. And that's exactly how she delivered it. And he's been working out of a library, literally, for 3 years since. So assumptions were made that their relationship wanted him to be home and that they were going to do things together. Assumptions that, I've got people that need me for breakfast. They call me all day long. I've got appointments constantly. People want to go to after dinner drinks. I've got a huge social network. And it's so disorienting when someone leaves that and they realize those were work relationships and they're still at work. And none of them are calling you. No one is having lunch with you. No one needs you anymore. That can lead to a very rapid decline. So let's get in front of it. Who are the relationships that are going to be part of your next phases? So the way I picture it, I'm from a very rural part of Indiana, and I have been mudding many times. How many of you have ever been mudding? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. If you're good at it, once your windshield's completely covered in mud, you stop. and you make at least a little hole that you can see out of before you hit the accelerator again. And when it comes to the personal stuff, I have found a lot of people they've relied on themselves so much to build their businesses, especially when we talk about our business owners, that they're just getting it done. And day after day, they're getting it done. But on the personal side, that windshield's getting muddier and muddier. They don't have the time, they don't think, or they don't take the time for real personal introspection. They don't know the status of their other relationships. They just figure everybody's there, right? I birthed them, or I caused their coming into life, or I married them. Of course they're fine. Or they don't think about their own health. You know, I'm still able to get to work every day. My health is fine. And when you talk about the future, either they don't want to dive into that personal, very, very personal area, or again, there's so many assumptions that they don't even care what's on the other side. My goal is to get to the day with the money that I want, with the tools that are going to serve me and grow over time. My goal is to get to that point. The rest will take care of itself. And sometimes people are so defined by that business that they've created that they don't even kind of want to think about what's going to happen on the other side. They're like, I'll work till I die. I had a lawyer tell me they'll pry the keyboard out of my cold, dead fingers. It's pretty much what happened. His last day of work was in the last week of his life. Yeah. Because it was something he didn't want to face. It was muddy. I'm good at what I do. It's what I do. I'm going to stay here. So my point with all of this is I have found over and over that when we can have people plan and figure out who they want to be, what they want to be, who are going to be those people in their life, how are they going to live it, what's going to make it, what'd you say, make it a purpose to get out of bed every morning. When they figure that out and they clear the mud and they see a really bright future, everyone I've worked with so far has either moved that retirement or the sale of their business closer, or they've taken a nebulous, I don't know when it's going to be, and put a stake in the sand that this is going to be it, which is so exciting to watch that happen. Without planning, what I've seen over and over, relationships aren't ready. The divorce rate in the 50s is by far the highest it's ever been in the history of the planet. Now, part of that is cultural, but a big part of that is, here's a Charlotte question, but I know her answer. I'm going to ask the rest of you. How many of you feel you have really good conflict management skills? Nobody? Kind of, sort of. Yeah. As a society, that is not one of the best skills we have as people. And so I've worked with many couples who are like, you know what, we've gone different directions, we want different things, we're not on the same page anymore, and it feels easier to go different directions. And that's what's happening, again, at a massive scale, especially in our more developed countries. This is happening on a massive scale. But Wall Street Journal, an article just came out, 2 days ago, if anyone saw it, about the repercussions of that. And so what I've seen clinically is usually one of the two will find a new mate, married or not, but somebody to go do things with, and the other one kind of gets lost in the afterwash of like the ship sailing away, and that one tends to decline rapidly. But then the kids have to figure out, navigate life differently, right, for holidays and whatever. And then the friends. I was just speaking to a friend this weekend who his friend was married, and he and his wife were like the social networkers of the community, of like the subdivision or whatever. They got a divorce, and the man said, he goes, no one calls me anymore. It's like people don't know what to say. They don't know how to invite me over when everybody else is a couple. So he said, I went, I kind of expected to go halvesies. So this couple, they thought, friends would kind of divide, but instead friends didn't know what to say to them, so they really didn't engage with them at all. I didn't even expect that. So helping couples have the difficult conversations before that time. Sometimes it's finances that rip them apart, and sometimes it's other expectations as well. And so the other one is it's Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, so we didn't even know what good timing this was. But what population do you suppose has the actual highest suicide rate? But like what age group do you usually hear about? Teens and young adults is what we hear about. It's people, men, from their late 40s to their early 70s who are navigating this time. And so there needs to be a lot more discussion around this. But some of the reasons that I've encountered as I've researched this is they didn't meet their metrics. I didn't reach my financial goals. I didn't reach my professional aspiration goals. My relationships are falling apart. Sometimes it's that. I've told some of you, the ones that are really breaking my heart are when I accumulated all this wealth from my family, and now I have a diagnosis that I think is going to be expensive. So rather than use that money for my treatment, I'm going to end things so my family has the money preserved. I've talked to a lot of those families, and not a single one anticipated it was always a him, that's the decision he was making, and would never have been their choice. Never have been their choice. And then, picture this. We get busy, right? When we're doing something like wrapping up our career, preparing our business to sell, we're very, very busy. And so we're at work a little bit earlier in the morning, maybe don't do the workout before we go into work, because I can get to that once I retire. Maybe a little more fast food. I got to stay at my desk. I got to get this done. Head down. I got to get everything ready for the business sale. Stress levels higher. Not going out and taking walks. Not going and spending time with friends because you got to get it done. So they're at the desk, working, not realizing that they're not tigers that bounce as well anymore. And so they put on that extra 20 pounds. They stop exercising. They lose the muscle. Sometimes their health has already declined so far by the time they retire that they don't realize they can't quite get it back. So the health planning, and then there's data that first year after the last day of work is the most dangerous year of someone's life for all of these reasons. But there's not very much talk about that. And the biggest thing is it's preventable. It's completely preventable. Let's get in front of it. And let's take health as seriously as we do wealth and put them together like peanut butter and jelly, and who doesn't like that? And so that the plan is a more robust plan. So we talk about that so often. I know you're completely on the same page. So the way I picture it is you've got this bridge that's going to take you to this just absolutely beautiful, bright future. And people are assuming that they have the beautiful, bright future ahead of them, and they can have, but they just have holes in their bridge. They've forgotten to plan some of these other parts. And when they create that plan, then they can get where they're going. And I just want to mention one other part. Our world is messy right now. High anxiety levels are just pervasive, I think, among everyone. I think on a society level, and this is kind of my why for what I do, is we need people who have a lifetime of accumulated skills and perspectives, ways to manage things that, they've figured out problem solving. They've just done so much in their lifetime. Our society really, really needs that wisdom. And so part of what I do is let's do everything we can to preserve them, help them transition safely across this bridge, and then plug in all sorts of new ways. It might be something completely different than what they're doing right now, which is fun. Maybe Alan is a closet guitarist and we don't know it, and he just takes off with his music because he couldn't. Maybe Joe is theatrical, and he just has been waiting for his chance to be in community theater, and now he can. It can be something unrelated, or Or Todd might continue to help people with their finances, but he's helping people that could never afford his services before. But now he's able to take his skills in very new ways. So we all win when that happens.
Thank you.